Welcome and settle in as we drift together into the quiet rhythm of a night shift on an under-ice station on Europa, where the drill sings a steady tone and the tide inside a buried ocean keeps a soft, patient whisper that never needs to raise its voice. Imagine yourself in a small, warm room carved like a lantern into the ice, where instruments glow with muted blues and greens, where the air is clean and slightly cool, and where each breath feels unhurried and light, as if the whole station is rocking very gently on the slow pulse of a distant moon. If you find comfort in calm detail and unhurried moments, you are in the right place. If you enjoy this gentle journey, please like this video, subscribe to Boring Science for Sleep, and tap the playlist link in the description so the next calm story starts on its own while you drift. How sleepy are you on a scale of 1 to 10? Now, imagine you are here in low gravity, moving at a measured pace, boots whispering against a textured deck that has a faint resilience underfoot. Your hands find rails that are smooth and slightly warm, and when you let go, your body continues gently forward, as if the station is reminding you to take your time. The night shift is not dark in a harsh way. It is a soft dusk of machines and screens, and the faint blue of the ice around you, where the station's warmth gives the walls a frosted sheen. Behind the walls, beyond layers of insulation and ribs of composite, the ice stretches upward for kilometers and downward to a quiet sea that has rolled and drifted through eras older than any story on Earth. Everything here moves slowly. Even thoughts seem to unfurl like silk, thread by thread, without knots, without hurry. On Europa, the surface is cold enough that ice feels like stone. It is so cold that sound spreads differently, and yet the station fills the silence with a familiar suite of gentle notes. A narrow pump murmurs, like someone humming at the edge of a dream. A circulation fan exhales, steady and calm, turning over the air with kind attention. From the borehole that connects the habitat to the ocean below, there is a sound like a sustained chord from a distant instrument, the drill's tones softened by water and ice to a soothing, even sigh. You listen, and it becomes as regular as a breathing companion. The gentle rhythm continues, and you relax into it. Europa turns around Jupiter in a measured dance. The moon keeps one face toward the giant planet, and the gravity of that neighbor never really lets go. The ice flexes a little as the shape of the moon stretches and settles, not dramatically, but in slow measures that add up across time. Inside the ocean, unseen currents lean and exhale. That is the whisper in the pipes and cables, a hint of pressure that rises and falls so slowly it feels like the sea is inhaling for hours, then exhaling for hours more. Instruments translate these patient motions into thin lines on screens. Each line is calm. Each line is a small story that unfolds at a pace your body begins to trust. You check a display where the drill sends updates. It is a cryobot, a patient cylinder that melts a path instead of slicing. At its nose, heat moves into the ice with quiet certainty. Along its sides, a blanket of warm fluid recirculates to keep the tunnel open. The cryobot descends a few millimeters at a time, and then a few more, always pausing to sense the clarity of the ice, to read temperature, to measure salinity in faint hints of brine, the way you might hold your breath and notice a change in the feel of a room. The tether that connects it to the station is slim and careful, carrying power and data, and anything that matters, through a route that has become very familiar. The gentle rhythm continues. Imagine yourself leaning close to a viewport that is not like a window to space, but a window into the borehole itself. You see a long, vertical river of warm darkness where lights are set to the lowest useful glow. Tiny particles drift like flakes in a snow globe that has been turned once and then allowed to settle for the night. Now and then, a very small bubble drifts upward, its motion slowed by the thickness of the water in its narrow channel, and it taps the float of a sensor with a soft, deliberate touch, like a polite knock. You observe without effort. This is an ordinary night. The drill is steady. The tide's whisper is soft and reassuring. The station's pulse is your pulse. The idea of day and night on Europa is different. On the surface, one long day lasts more than 3 Earth days. In the ocean under the ice, there is no sunrise, no sunset. The station keeps its own time with calm lights that shift in a gentle pattern. During the night shift, the brightness is low and golden. The air smells faintly of clean fabric, a trace of warm plastic, and the soft, watery coolness from the borehole corridor. You move through a short passage where the floor slopes almost imperceptibly. The gravity is light, a friendly reminder that your steps do not have to work hard. Your shoulders feel free, like they belong to a body at rest. You pass the seismometer console, where a green trace walks slowly across the screen. Every step on the station's deck appears as a tiny hill, a friendly signature that repeats and then fades. Farther below, the ice sometimes shifts in ways so gradual they are more like a memory than an event. The instrument marks them anyway, because here, patience is a tool. Next to it, a hydrophone listens through the water in the borehole and lower ocean. What it hears is a landscape of sound without edges. It hears the slow breathing of the tide, the occasional hush of distant ice grazing ice, the hush of bubbles far below. In this register, your own breath is a note that folds into the rest without any insistence. Europa's ocean is deep by earthly standards. It is expected to be many tens of kilometers from the top of the water to the rocky seafloor, where warmth can still rise from below. The ice above can be a few kilometers to tens of kilometers thick, perhaps more in places, perhaps less where the moon's own tides knead the shell and make it a little warmer, a little softer. Melt pockets can form like secret ponds inside the shell, not lakes in the way we imagine them, but lenses of saline water that gently shift, then refreeze, then move again over years. The station's maps of the ice are made from many kinds of listening. They are patient, quiet maps. They evolve without hurry, layer by careful layer, until the shape of this hidden world becomes familiar enough to feel like a home. There are instruments here that measure the salts in the water, because salts carry a story of origin and journey. If magnesium, sulfate, and sodium appear in certain balances, that suggests ancient rock weathered by water in a slow conversation beneath the ocean floor. If other compounds appear, that suggests different processes, like seawater meeting rocks that give off hydrogen when they are altered, a chemical generosity that can feed simple life if it ever found a way to begin. You do not need to decide tonight. You do not need to chase a breakthrough. You are tending a quiet continuity. You are making sure the data arrives gently and intact, like a letter delivered at a reasonable hour. Imagine yourself lifting a small vial with gloved fingers. The vial holds a few clear milliliters from lower down, water that smells faintly mineral and cold only through the glass against your skin. You tilt it toward a spectrometer and slide it onto a tray that welcomes it with a soft click. The instrument is unhurried by design. Its light passes through the water, reads the story in the wavelengths, and returns a simple, elegant graph with no surprises. You smile without quite smiling, because quiet consistency is a kind of music, and the station seems to approve of your appreciation. The gentle rhythm continues. Above you, by many kilometers, Jupiter is a presence without being seen from here. The planet's magnetic field touches Europa and keeps particles in motion near the surface. But under the ice, the ocean is shielded, settled, and private, like a deep cave with faraway weather. The magnetometer inside the station listens for the signature of the big field as it changes, and for the response of the ocean itself, which behaves like a vast electrical conductor that answers back in slow, smooth echoes. These are not jagged signals. They are soft and round. The science feels like listening to a cello through a wall while sitting on a cushioned floor. Time passes, and you notice that it is still passing, which is a comfort in itself. The station keeps a routine that wraps around you like a blanket. Every hour, there is a short checklist you perform with easy attention. You glance at battery levels. Power flows from a compact source that glows on the status board like a well-tended hearth. Waste heat is not wasted here. It warms the station gently, and at the edges, in circulation loops, it is shared with the cryobot. Every few hours, a small sledge of filters and sorbent cartridges circulates through the air system, grubbing the breath of the station so that exhalations become inhales in a safe, simple loop. This closed, careful system is a quiet triumph of design. It smells lightly of metal and clean cloth. At the core of your shift, the drill continues. Endless is a pleasant word here, not a heavy one.
It means the sound does not begin or end in a way that startles. It means the station knows what to do and keeps doing it while you rest your forehead against the gentle curve of a bulkhead. The cryobot advances through ice that shows a history in its layers. Some sections are clear, like ancient glass. Some are cloudy with fines and salts and tiny spheres of frozen brine.
Some hold faint bands of dust that drifted down eons ago from space, settled by gravity onto the surface, and were later folded inward by the slow upwelling of ice. Each layer looks like a sentence in a long book about patience. Imagine yourself floating your hand over a panel labeled Tether Management. You touch a control softly, and a spool responds with a whisper of motion, releasing a millimeter more of the umbilical. The tension sensor shows a value in steady digits that barely change. The lights on the cryobot's internal cameras show a gentle cone of visibility, and in that cone, the bottom edge of the melt channel glows faintly like a halo. A single curious particle spins lazily in the eddy at the nose. A tiny friend that appears in frame, drifts out, and returns again later, as if showing you a patient dance with no urgency at all. You let the spool settle, and the number stays faithful. The gentle rhythm continues. The study of tides on Europa is more than a metaphor, and yet it works so tenderly as one. The exact distances and angles between Europa, Jupiter, and neighboring moons play their parts in a measured sequence that repeats in a way that is never quite identical. The whisper you hear in the hydrophones and in the almost silent pressure sensors is the sound of that repetition. It is like the sea telling you that change can be slow and still be real. It is like a wake that never tips the boat. You could map it with math, but you do not need to tonight. You perceive it with your body as a slow assurance, a soft, predictable turning of the world. When you prepare samples for biological analysis, the station becomes even quieter, as if showing respect for small possibilities. The bench is warmly lit and free of shadows. Tiny channels on glass chips shine like pale threads. You introduce a drop of water into a sealed, sterile space, and automated pipettes move with the grace of a thoughtful host, offering reagent and light and time. Under a microscope that prefers long exposures and steady hearts, the field fills with delicate grains, salt crystals with faces like soft stars, and unremarkable specks that move only when the honest physics of the fluid shifts them. If life exists here, it may be as patient as the ice, as small as this view. Tonight, you are not here to find it or deny it. You are here to watch without judgment, to keep the bench tidy, and to note your observations in calm, measured words that feel like they are already part of the room. Europa's gravity is about 1/7 of Earth's, and that makes every action feel like a graceful choice. You hardly notice a difference in your breathing. What you notice is the way objects settle more slowly when you set them down, as if they are reluctant to leave your hand. Your mug of warm, slightly sweet tea rests in a holder that keeps it stable. When you lift it, The liquid surface trembles a little and then becomes smooth again, a tiny lake that does not mind the trip. You take a sip and feel the warmth spread, not with speed, but with quiet persistence. The taste is simple and familiar. The station appreciates simple choices. You glance at the communications console. Messages from orbit and from far away arrive with predictable delay, little packets of careful text and steady updates. The system is set to speak softly, in subtle chimes, so that nothing ever demands your attention. You read a note from the day shift summarizing a calibration, and then you leave a message for the next person who will sit where you sit. Your words are unhurried, and you enjoy choosing them. You describe the temperature gradient in the borehole as smooth and the drill as serene. You describe the tide as present and kind. You sign the note with your initials, which feel like quiet footprints across the deck of a ship at night. The geology of Europa's seafloor is a quiet conversation with time. While Earth's vast mantle churns and the oceans above it break into waves and storms, Europa hides its motions beneath a still roof. The rock here is touched by water in the deep, slow way that makes new minerals and releases gases, all at a pace that suits the dark. If hot venting occurs, it likely does so as gentle fountains, not roaring plumes, with minerals blossoming into shapes like delicate chimneys. Somewhere far below the station, if you could listen closely enough, perhaps particles settle in a soft rain that never hits with force. That idea makes your eyelids feel pleasantly heavy, as if the mind itself is settling into a comfortable bed of thoughts. The air system sighs delicately behind a panel to your left. It knows your presence by the subtle shift in carbon dioxide, and it answers by brushing the air through a filter with long fibers that hold dust without complaint. A light across the room flickers once as a small controller switches to a redundant circuit, then steadies at its usual low brightness. Reliability here is a gentle art. Everything that can be duplicated is duplicated, and the switchovers are as smooth as a lullaby. You find comfort in knowing that even the comforting routines are backed by other routines that are just as gentle and faithful. The gentle rhythm continues. Imagine yourself at the borehole interface chamber. The hatch to the water is sealed behind layers of polished valves and soft-seated gaskets. Pressure gauges sit in arcs like friendly moons, their needles poised. When you touch the metal, it is warmer than the air by a small margin, holding on to heat that prefers to stay. You press your ear to the structure, not to hear an alarm, but to enjoy a tone that is more felt than heard. It is the sound of the water, moving just enough to remind you that there is a vastness below, a quiet body that receives and returns a slow tide. You pull back, and in low gravity, your head floats a little before settling. If you were to describe this in a note, you might use the word buoyant for more than one meaning. In the analysis room, you watch the magnetometer's record and imagine the invisible fields as soft scarves draping around the moon. As Europa moves through Jupiter's magnetic reach, the ocean responds, and that response is the signal. Water is not just water here. Salts give it a voice that can answer back. The induced fields are ghosts that let you measure the presence of the sea without ever seeing it. The fact that you are within reach of that sea tonight has a humble quality. It feels less like a rival and more like companionship, as if the ocean has always been here and is pleased to have company that respects its calm. The path of heat through the cryobot is a gentle calculation. To keep melting downward, you must give the ice enough energy to change state without making the water too turbulent. The heat flows in a soft gradient. The water rises along the sides and carries warmth back to the station through the annular channel. At the same time, a careful wash of sterile fluid prevents the melt channel from refreezing too quickly. The balance is subtle and can be recognized by a certain serene stability in the numbers. Tonight, the numbers are quiet. The pump frequency is steady. The temperature difference between nose and tail is soothingly constant. You could listen to these numbers like a bedtime story and find yourself drifting, which is perfectly allowed. Europa's surface is crisscrossed by lines and bands. These features tell a story of pulling and pushing, of surfaces opening slightly and then sealing again with fresh ice that looks darker, where salts and older materials have been folded into the mix. Here under the shell, you feel the counterpart to that story in slow motion. A bend in the ice above the station lets through a slightly warmer flux, and the temperature sensor near the ceiling of the main corridor notes it with a barely perceptible rise. Nothing is sharp. Everything is rounded, moothed by the scale of time and the insulating quiet of the environment. The station is like a chapter tucked into the middle of a very long book, important only in the way any chapter is important to itself. In the small galley, a tray holds packets that look tidy and unassuming. You take something simple and savory, warm it in a unit that hums politely, and let the smell join the room in a very modest way. You eat slowly, in small bites, because there is no reason to hurry. You enjoy the texture more than the taste, because it is a change from the smoothness of liquids and the uniformity of the station's surfaces. Afterward, you clean up with clear water that beads in slow droplets before the cloth gathers them. Each bead a small planet with its own gravity and shine. The chore feels like a meditation. The gentle rhythm continues. Outside in the distance, if outside were a direction you could take with ease, the ocean continues through its cycles, pulled by gravity and shaped by the shell. Seafloor relief may create channels of current that never truly stop, streaming around rocky rises and along gentle slopes. The currents are slow, so slow that a grain of mineral might travel only a short distance in a human year. This slow motion is a comfort. It suggests that even a subtle push, given enough time, draws a graceful line across a vast canvas. The thought lingers like a melody's last note. In a corner of the lab, a small robot floats in a testing pool that uses borehole water, suspended by a careful cradle, so it feels the same density and chill it will know below. Its propellers turn no faster than a sleepy cat's breath. It holds its position relative to a soft marker on the pool's edge, using gentle light to track with an unblinking gaze. You watch it tune itself, learning how to expend the least effort for the greatest steadiness. The goal here is ease, not speed. When it is ready, it will join the cryobot's path and then slip into the ocean for local surveys, tethered for safety, a polite visitor in a vast house that has always preferred quiet. Your hands glide over a touchscreen. You set a monitoring window to linger on the tide pressure over the next 6 hours, the length of this night. The graph moves at a deliberate pace, shifting by small amounts, a wave spread out across time so that the rise looks almost vertical only if you compress the view. It is a trick of scale that reminds you not to get lost in snapshots. The ocean is slow and steady. The station is slow and steady. You are slow and steady. The sentence forms itself and repeats, and with each repetition, your shoulders find a little more ease. Some nights include calibration of the thermal cameras embedded along the borehole wall. These cameras see the faintest differences in temperature, and they record areas where freezing is more active or where slight convective fingers of warmer water creep upward. When you adjust them, you tell them softly, in the silent language of settings, that they are doing well. They return crisp images in a palette of cool blues and warmer ambers that look like abstract art. You let the images scroll, and you identify familiar patterns that indicate stability. The cameras seem content. Their contentment is contagious. On a shelf, a small printed guide explains the station's structure in simple words. The habitat is a set of linked cylinders and spheres with soft corners. The borehole interface is one level below. The cryobot bay is lower still. The flotation boundary, where the station's buoyancy balances the ice's embrace, is noted with a ring of lights that are set to low and steady. You imagine the whole structure as a luminous pearl caught gently in a column of water within a tower of ice. It is a reassuring image. The station feels held, not trapped, supported by forces that are predictable and kind within their context. You consider Europa's origin, the way icy bodies gather from dust and rock, the way heat can come from formation and tides, and the slow settling of radioactive minerals. You consider the way water remains water when it is sheltered from space by a thick shell, the way light that cannot reach the ocean gives way to chemistry that can. These thoughts are scientific and also restful, like counting slow swells on an unseen sea. Counting is soothing in any case. You count heartbeats between pump breaths. You count the seconds it takes for a single bubble in the borehole camera view to rise from one marker to the next. The numbers are small, the movements unhurried, the act of counting like pulling a blanket to your chin. The soft horizon of your attention is part of the station's design. The sofa in the small lounge area has a gentle curve that supports your lower back. The fabric is textured like fine felt, and it warms under you slowly. The light above the sofa is a crescent that lets you read without glare. You open a log from a previous mission year, and the words are as calm as yours. The team then wrote about a day when the tide pressure at depth shifted slightly more than average, and they described it the way one might describe a rain that lasted a little longer than usual. Then they wrote about coffee and a shared story, and after that they wrote about the drill resuming its regular tone. The continuity feels like company. The drill's music shifts, not in pitch, but in timbre, as it transitions from a clearer layer of ice to one with tiny inclusions. This is expected. The change is like a new instrument joining the ensemble. You glance at the control panel and see the adjustment already in progress. A small tweak to the heat profile that smooths the transition. You confirm with a calm tap, and the panel acknowledges with a quiet change in color. Everything that can be automated is automated, but everything that benefits from human presence remains friendly to touch. Still awake. Comment the secret word, nebula, beyond the consoles, beyond the equipment racks. The borehole corridor feels like a catwalk across a dark well. The handrail is solid. The floor grating is firm. The cable ducts along the wall hum in soft chorus. You pause here often, not because you must, but because the space invites stillness. A soft glow strips the edges of the passage with light, so the center remains a dark ribbon where your eyes can rest. The water's surface is far below the station's hull, a moving mirror you do not see from here, but you feel that it exists the way you feel a slow heartbeat without pressing your fingers to your wrist. On the other side of the door, the sleeping module is spare and welcoming. The bunk is a shell with smooth lines, a small cocoon with a dimmable glow inside. Even during a shift, you sometimes sit at the edge for a minute and let your neck rest, listening to the station sing its quiet songs. The schedule allows for short pauses, not as interruptions, but as parts of the work. Rest here is not a reward, it is a tool. You emerge with your breath a little slower, which is exactly right. Europa's crust may have places where the ice opens and closes over long spans, trading parts of the surface with parts below. If oxidants are made by radiation at the surface, some can eventually find their way into the sea, carried by the movements of the shell, giving the water a varied chemistry. This idea matters to scientists who design sensitive tests. It matters to you in a different way. It means the ocean is not sealed away from change. It means gentleness can still be dynamic. The distinction is pleasant. It lowers your heart rate without effort. The soundproofing in the station has a plush quality. Materials with fine pores and soft fibers line the higher traffic areas. They absorb the edges of footsteps and the click of a panel latch. Only the purposeful sounds remain. The result is not silence, but a curated calm. The hydrophone feed sometimes plays softly in the background, filtered to remove low rumbles, so that what remains is a breathy, airy tone that many describe as a distant waterfall heard through thick velvet. The analogy makes sense to you the more you listen, and then you stop needing the analogy. The sound becomes itself, familiar and unobtrusive, like white noise mixed with a hint of underwater bells. On the bench beside the microscope lies a small book of reference images. The images show ice grains under polarized light, making the crystals glow in many soft colors depending on their orientation. Some grains look like lazy comets, some like petals, all of them peaceful. Matching current samples to these reference forms is like matching clouds to a guide, not to classify in a rigid way, but to learn their language. You flip a page and feel the paper move slowly, low gravity lingering in the edge of the page as if reluctant to fall. You place a drop on a slide and watch the texture unfold. It is ordinary and calming. The gentle rhythm continues. You think about the energy budget of the station. It is a practical, pleasant thought. Power in, power stored, power used, waste heat recycled. The numbers balance modestly. There is a satisfaction in knowing that your environment is an equation with a solution that is not delicate or precarious, but robust and consistent. Even here, in a place that would be inhospitable without technology, the technology has learned a tone of voice that is polite and steady. If you were to step one day into the water in a suit, you would feel the grip of cold kept at bay by layers that know how to retain heat. You would feel the tug of the tether like a hand, not heavy, just present. You would hear the tide more directly as a pressure change across your suit, not jolting, only firm and slow. But tonight is a night of insides. The station is home enough. The ocean is a neighbor whose presence can be enjoyed through the wall with as much contentment as if you shared a cup on a front porch under distant stars. Somewhere in the quiet, a timer breathes a soft tone. It is time to check the sampling carousel. The device turns with a movement that is nearly ceremonial, showing each sealed vial to a sensor that confirms integrity, then lining the next up for future capture. The seals are perfect, but still the system checks them. The way you might check a door you locked already. This care eases the mind. The carousel moves on, and you note the timestamp. The note-taking is soothing. A series of brief lines in a simple hand that does not need to be perfect, because it is yours. The data that flows from the cryobot arrives in small packets first, then coalesces into larger, elegant pictures. Temperature profiles look like familiar landscapes now to you, with valleys where microcurrents reduce heat and ridges where clear ice conducts quickly. Salinity profiles look like soft hills with barely perceptible slopes. When you compare them in your mind, you find the edges that line up, and those edges make a quiet harmony. Every now and then, a micro anomaly appears, and you treat it like a stray note that you can fold back into the music by checking a connection or smoothing a parameter. The harmony returns, and it is almost as if it never left. You stretch, and the motion feels like a yawn in the structure of the station. Panels do not creak. They accept your movement with gentle companionship. You look toward a small porthole that opens into an ice-light well, an artificial channel filled with refrozen, bright ice that carries a faint glow from the station's outer lights into the interior. The ice there is full of tiny prisms, and when a pulse of light moves down the well for a periodic system check, the prisms catch it and scatter it in a way that looks like a slowly falling snow that glows. The pulse passes, and the well returns to its usual cool presence. You feel the same quiet satisfaction you feel after watching a candle flame steady itself in a room without drafts. Europa's tide does not only move water, it also moves the idea of time. Here, you measure night, not by the sun going down, but by the curve of pressure, the bow of ice response, the regularity of your own tasks. This shift is a gift to sleepy minds. It lets you leave behind the usual markers and adopt kinder ones. Suppose for a moment that tomorrow is not morning, but simply the next smooth step, an ongoing path at the same incline. The thought keeps the shoulders loose. When the station's external seismometers feel a distant creak from the ice above, the display shows it in a soft swell that rises, pauses, and falls. You mark the time and make a note that the event was small and typical. There is no alarm and no cause for tension, only a gentle reminder that the world is moving because it is alive with its own kind of calm energy. Stability here includes motion. Rest includes the smallest changes that keep systems from locking in place. The gentle rhythm continues. In a maintenance alcove, you find the toolkit laid out in a way that makes each piece easy to reach. The tools are wrapped in soft sleeves to keep them from knocking into each other, though the station rarely shakes them. Labels are clear but unobtrusive. You run a check on a valve actuator, watching a bar grow and shrink on a screen as the actuator turns with patient torque. The numbers fall within a narrow band that feels like a familiar bed. You return the tool to its place and slide the sleeve back on, and the motion is so ordinary it feels like a lullaby for your hands. Your mind touches down briefly on the question of life in this ocean and lets it go just as gently. The conditions here are plausible for chemistry that can knit itself into small, persistent patterns. If there is life, it may be slow and simple, quietly repairing itself, quietly swapping energy with its environment in ways that leave faint, beautiful signatures. The instruments on the bench are sensitive enough to notice such signatures over long periods, like a patient listener who learns to hear the softest part of a melody. The fact that no instrument blares a dramatic announcement is, tonight, a kindness. Meaning can grow like frost, delicate and gradual. The station's clock moves on. You check the drill log again and see that in the hours you have been present, the cryobot has advanced by only a fraction of a meter, which is exactly as planned. Speed is not the point. Contact is the point. Presence is the point. You arrange fresh cartridges for the next sampling window, lay out sterile sleeves, and watch the lab's dehumidifier trace a tiny curve downward as it draws out the moisture that gathered during your earlier work. The machines have their own quiet habits. You respect them. They respect you. A note on the wall, printed on a sheet that is laminated to survive humidity and time, describes the soft protocols that keep this ocean untainted by your curiosity. The words talk about clean lines and sealed volumes. They talk about steps that were taken years ago to ensure that nothing living from another world enters this one attached to your tools. The tone is calm and careful. The sheet resembles a page from a favorite cookbook, well used and well loved, but for a recipe of care instead of flavor. You glance at it with the affection you reserve for ordinary principles that make life better. Imagine, for a moment, that you can sense the mass of Jupiter through the ice, not as a weight, but as a presence that assures you there is order. The orbits of the moons are arranged in a resonant pattern, and that pattern is the source of heat in the flexing of Europa's shell. The thought lands with the softness of a leaf on slowly moving water. Great forces, gentle outcomes. The station is a small room within grand forces, and everything tonight is within range of comfort. You check the crew log. Earlier, someone wrote a note about the way the borehole's upper rim has developed a scalloped texture, the product of cycles of slight warming and cooling around the edges, where the water meets the station's structure. They thought it looked like the lip of a well-loved cup. You smile because you notice the same thing, and the comparison felt truthful. You add your agreement in parentheses, and the record becomes a conversation across hours and days, a soothing continuity of shared looking. The station's lighting gradually shifts hue as the night deepens. The change is slow enough that you would not notice it if you tried to. It is meant to coax circadian rhythms towards sleep when the time comes, to whisper to the body about the approach of rest. For now, it holds you in a long twilight that supports focus without straining the senses. Shadows are soft. Lines are soft. The hydrophone background is soft. Even your thoughts sound like the pages of a book turning very gently. Out there, beneath and beyond, the ocean may brush against rock and make shapes we would find familiar in spirit, if not in detail. The floor could host plains where fine mineral dust settles, lumps of rock that stand like quiet islands in the dark, slopes where currents gather salts into bands over the years. None of this is restless. All of it is slow. The moon's heartbeat is never out of breath. The gentle rhythm continues. You take a moment to check the station's external skin through thermal readings. You see the warmth from inside as a smooth gradient leading to the cool. There are no hot spots, no cold nights in the data, only uniformity that feels like a steady hand. On Earth, weather would create variances every moment. Here, stability is the weather, and you find that comforting in a very direct way. In the records, A calibration run from last week shows a brief dip that you can now attribute to a filter change. You add a small note for future readers, even though the data already has a flag. The act of writing is for them and for you. It slows your breathing. It anchors you to the moment. If words had mass here, they would fall slowly like tiny feathers and land without sound. Everything around you participates in a careful conversation, and you are both speaker and listener. Heat tells ice how to move. Ice tells sensors how it feels. Sensors tell screens what to draw. Screens tell you where the edges of change are. You answer with small decisions that are never urgent. The loop is closed in the best possible way. You could sit here and listen forever, and the station would continue to hum. The tide would continue to whisper, and the drill would continue its patient descent. These hours are for tending, not chasing. You tend the instruments, the logs, the power, the water that is both path and subject. You tend your own pace, keeping it even, kind, and aligned to the station. Outside of time, between ice and ocean, in the soft light that could be called night because it is gently dimmer than the hours before, you are in a place that welcomes quiet. The gentle rhythm continues. As the end of the shift approaches, you perform the last unhurried checks. The cryobot's heat profile remains smooth. The tether tension remains steady. The hydrophone's tide curve continues its long arc, lifting as if toward a distant shore that no one needs to reach. The lab is tidy. The samples are sealed and labeled. The logs are complete. You refill your mug with warm water because the station likes simple rituals. You sit back on the sofa and feel the slight give of the cushion, just enough to make your body feel held. Before you leave, you walk once more along the borehole corridor, listening to the faint hush of water and the soft, distant tone of the drill. You place your palm on the handrail and breathe slowly, counting a few breaths for their gentle sameness. Your last act is to dim the lights one step further so the station can rest, and to set the playlist from the description to continue with another calm journey that will keep company with anyone who lingers here in this moment of ease. You return to the console and send a short, friendly summary to the next shift. You tell them the night was serene, the drilling unbroken, the tides whispering at their accustomed level. You tell them you wish them a quiet watch and that you will be nearby, resting where the station's lights are the softest, grateful for the endless patience of ice and ocean. Imagine yourself now letting the eyes go heavy, welcoming the weight of sleep like a tender blanket placed by a careful friend. The tide continues its long breath. The drill continues its steady glide. The station continues to be exactly what it needs to be. If you are already drifting, that is perfect. If you are still awake, you can let the sound of the station be your lullaby for a little longer. The gentle tones of machinery and the ocean's low murmur blending into a single, calming presence. As you sink a little deeper into whatever supports you right now, know that you are safe, that you are cared for, by a small world of careful routines and friendly instruments. Thank you for keeping company with this quiet night under the ice of Europa. Sleep well, and when you awaken, we will be here again with another calm journey. Before you go, please subscribe and leave a like so we can keep releasing videos this often. And feel free to keep the playlist flowing so the learning continues softly while you rest.